I made a dress-up game using Godot, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it. You'll need 3 main PNG assets, a model, and 2 pieces of clothing. Load up Godot. I'm using version 4.5 and create a new project. Click Node 2D on the left side of the scene tree to create a new 2D scene. Click the plus button to create a new sprite 2D. Drag and drop your PNGs into the bottom left corner under the resource folder. Then with our new sprite 2D selected, click and drag the model PNG into the empty texture slot there. Because my assets are pixel art, I'll change the texture settings under canvas for sprite 2D by changing the filter setting from inherit to nearest. You can skip this step if you're not using pixel art. Control S to save and add a new scene by pressing the tabbed plus button in the top middle of the screen. This time we'll start by adding a sprite 2D. This scene is going to act as a piece of clothing instead of like a main game screen. Similar to the model, click and drag your first clothing piece into the empty texture slot. Select the Sprite 2D node and click the plus button to add an Area 2D node. Click it again to add Collision Polygon 2D node under that. With the Polygon 2D node selected, if you click on the main scene, you can see these diamonds appear. This is how we outline the exact shape we want our mouse click to affect. Finish your shape by clicking the first diamond you started with, and to get rid of the shape, right-click anywhere. Leave it empty for now, we'll come back to it. Make sure the Sprite 2D node is selected, and on the right side of the screen, click the Node tab, then under that, click the Groups tab. Add a new group called Clothing. Next, click the little page symbol next to the Sprite 2D node. We're going to add a new script. Call it drag and drop. You can remove the ready function from this automatic script. Select Area 2D on the left side of the screen, and then go to the right side under Node, under Signals, right-click the Area 2D input event, and connect that to the script. It should pop up with a little function here for you. In the process node, type if dragging the position is going to equal where our mouse is. So get the global mouse position and then subtract an offset for that, which we'll use later. Set that up by putting a variable at the top of the screen called var_of. Type vector equals vector, just set it to 0 for now. Add a dragging variable at the top as well. Type boolean, set it to false. Then underneath our on Area 2D input event, I'm going to put a little underscore in front of some of these just to get rid of this yellow highlight. In the function body, we're going to ask if event is input event mouse button, and if the event is pressed, dragging should be set to true. Otherwise, set dragging to false. Control S to save, and I'm going to name mine empty fit. And if you'd like to add audio, go ahead and add an audio listener by clicking the plus button in the scene tree. Click Control, click and drag to put it in the script, and we'll use this later. Click Control, click and drag the Area 2D as well into the script. Control S to save and select the empty fit scene that we've just made in the resource folder. Control D to duplicate and name this to whatever clothing option you're going to use for your first clothing piece. Double click that and then drag your clothing item PNG into the empty Sprite 2D texture, and then go into the Collision Polygon 2D, and here we're actually going to properly outline this. Finish the shape by clicking the diamonds you first started with, and Control S to save, then go back to our main scene and click and drag this clothing item into the main scene. It looks good to me, so I'm going to go ahead and start on the crop top I made. Select our empty fit scene and Control D to duplicate. This time I'm going to call it top, and repeat the exact same steps we just did with the jeans. Click and drag the PNG into the texture slot, and then go to the Collision Polygon 2D and outline the shape. Click and drag the crop top into the main scene, and that also looks good to me. So let's add a camera. Go to the top left plus button to add a camera 2D to the scene. Then go to the right side to press play. I'm going to use the play button that lets you just play from any scene instead of the default play button, but either works. There are 3 issues with the script I'd like to solve. One is the offset, we didn't actually set that, we just initialized the variable. And the 2 sprites, if they're overlapping, you click them, it will select both sprites instead of just one. And 3, the Z index doesn't change. When I want to click the pants, I want that to show up on front of the crop top, but that doesn't happen, they stay in the same order. So we're going to fix this with a script. Go back to our game and right click the resource folder. We're going to add a script here directly called main. And we're going to make this a global script, so go to the project settings, globals, add our script we've just made, and click add in the far right as well, otherwise it won't add it. And then In our main script, we're going to type a variable clothing list and just leave this as empty for now. If you go into our drag and drop script now, you can see if I type main.clothingList, it shows as an accessible variable. Go back to our main script, we're going to set the clothing list initially on the ready function with clothing list equals get tree.get nodes in group clothing. That's why we added that tag originally. And then we're going to add another function to swap this process function with a order clothing function. And for count in range clothing list.size, so this will run for every item in our clothing list, we're going to set the z-index manually. So we get clothing list count.z-index equals count, and then we're also going to manually set the child of the first item. Our first item is our parent object, if you will, is the sprite 2D, and the first child is the area 2D. So we're going to set the z-index for both the sprite and the area 2D. Clothing list count.getChild at 0.z-index equals count as well. We're done with the main function now. We can close that and go to our drag and drop script again. And this is the hardest section of code. It's the most unintuitive. It's basically overriding the default behavior of area 2D to depend on the z-index that we're going to set manually with that list. I'll go through it a little bit, but if you want to know more, I actually got this code from another YouTuber, so I will link them in the description and put a pop-up here. Shout out to them for finding this. I struggled before I found their YouTube channel. We're getting this physics point query parameters 2D class to set where our mouse position is, and then checking all of the areas that your mouse click collides with underneath that click. And then at that point, we are returning the top one. That's the very top z-index collided area. I'll leave this on the screen for a little bit if you want to just copy it, but I'll also paste it down below. Then we just check if our current area 2D for the object we're on is equal to the item in the top level of that collider, the last item in the collider's list. And if it is, we set dragging to true. Here we'll also set the offset by getting the global mouse position where we clicked and subtracting the global position of the sprite itself, and save and test again. You'll notice that we still have the sprites not reordering on the z-index. That's because we haven't set that in the code yet. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm also going to implement a snapping feature. This is because I'm using pixel art and it's really inconvenient to find the perfect position for the sprite to sit at. So I'm going to put a perfect position variable here at the top of the script. And I'm going to set this to 0, 0 by default, and that should be correct, but if it's not, you can change that for each clothing item. I'm also going to add a position forgiveness variable. This is going to indicate how close you have to be to that perfect position with your mouse in order for the clothing item to snap onto our model. In order to make both of these accessible for each individual clothing piece, you got to put @export in front of both variables. I'm going to start with 20 pixels away on the Y and X axis. Go back down to our script and we're going to add an elif here. If pressed is false, that means you release the mouse. We want two separate things to happen. Either the clothing snaps on or it doesn't. If the position of the current sprite you're holding is within 20 pixels on the perfect position x-axis, then it should snap. Position should equal that perfect position. Test here, and it's working perfect. So I'll add and do the same thing for the y-axis on that elif statement, same one, and we're good to go. So we're going to move on to reordering of the z-indexes after we move the close around. Under our if press is true script, I want to make sure that that is now the last item in the list, and the one that was originally selected before that is underneath that. For lack of better words, we are just going through all the clothing list items and reordering them so that the last one clicked is always the last in that clothing list. So we're going to put if self is not the previous last item, then erase it from the list, call the main order clothing list function, and then on the main clothing list, push back self. Then set the self's z-index and the child of our self's z-index to the last item in the list. And now we have our sprites reordering correctly. If you click one, it should go in front. Now we're basically done with all of this. So you could stop here, but I'm going to add some sounds so that when you click, it makes a little clicking noise, and when you release, it also makes a clicking noise. Make or download an audio file. I'll link some down below. Open up your empty fit scene and click and drag that audio into the audio stream player's stream audio slot. in the far right of the inspector. You can test to make sure it added it correctly by clicking the little play checkbox below. Then go down to the bottom middle of this whole screen and you can see this little audio tab. We're going to make a new bus. It's a little unnecessary because I don't have any other audio in the game, but typically if you have music and separate sound effects, you'll want 2 different audio buses. I'm going to make one called sound effects, and then I'm going to set the bus in the audio file we added to use the sound effects bus. Repeat these steps for the jeans and the top, and then go into our drag and drop script. Add a line under here that says audio stream player.play, and then add it underneath each if statement, the elif statements and the if statement. I'm also going to change the pitch scale so it sounds a little different for when you click to grab a new piece and you unclick to release. I'll just do 0.1 and 1.9 to start. Let's test. That sounds a little crazy, so I'm going to go and change that pitch again. And this sounds good enough to me. We're done. If you'd like to see more of this kind of tutorial, let me know. Either way, thanks for watching. Have a good day.